Okay, welcome back. This will be video 16. We're in the section of Matthew 12, 38, 45. When we left off, needing to pick up with Zechariah 10, 3 and 11, 7. Now in Ezekiel 34, we started talking about the shepherds. What are the shepherds? These are cross-references. But of course, the shepherds, the Pharisees, and all these people were considered to be the people that were supposed to be teaching the people. So that's why we're into this at this point. Zechariah 10:3. Most of this is end time. You just have to understand the context. If you look through it, most people realize Zechariah chapter 4 and 5 is all connected to Revelation. A number of things connected to Revelation. But then we get to the end here and we'll see it's absolutely end time. 10:3, my anger burns against the shepherds, I'll punish the leaders of the flock, for the ever-living visits his flock of the house of Judah. And then he says just going down to verse 6, he mentions right there, for I will strengthen them, the house of Judah and the house of Joseph. So that's the two witnesses, that's all 12 tribes, and establish them because I pity. So they will not be as castaways. And it talks about Ephraim as well. So, castaways, yeah, they were sent into captivity. Go down to 11:4. Feed the flock for slaughter, whose guardians murder and do not consider themselves guilty, and whose seller says, thank the Lord, I am rich, for their shepherds pity them not. Well, shepherds, guardians. That's leaders of the country basically selling you into, bondage in a sense. We're in monetary bondage, if you want to look at that. Right now, we've got 2 states, I think, that are bankrupt. Can't pay their bills and billions in debt. So. More getting ready to follow. At any rate, talks about abandoning the flock and so on and so forth. Then you'll read about this 30 pieces of silver in verse 12, which goes to Matthew 27:9. And another mention of Judah and Israel in verse 14, so that's 11:14. And then he mentions the destructive shepherd, and then in 17, woe to that worthless shepherd who forgets the flock. The sword shall assail his right arm and eye, his arm wither, his right eye be totally blind. But then when in verse 12 there, we just bump right down. Again, we're talking about all 12 tribes. At that time, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone. So he's talking about Christ the stone, Christ the rock. It's another prophecy from the New Testament. All the heathen of the earth will collect against it, collecting against Christ. And he says he'll strike all the horsemen of the nations blind. He's talking about the armies at that time. Again, verse 6. Again, he goes down to verse 8, talking about the house of David will become a divine power, like a messenger of the ever-living before them. Yeah, he's actually talking about himself, about Christ helping them, in other words. And then again, there you go, Christ. In verse 10, they shall look upon him whom they pierced, and mourn over him as if mourning over a loved one, and grieve over him as over the firstborn. That's a quote about Christ from John 19:37. And also goes to Revelation 1:7. Then in 13:2, I'll remove their preachers and their foul spirit from the country. So he's putting all the blame on the preachers for a reason. And he's still talking about them. And then over here in 13:8, 2 parts of the country, in other words, 2/3 of the country will be cut off and die, but the third shall remain. So he's talking about the remnant. I'll pass that third through the fire and refine its silver as refined, test them as gold is tested. So that's the remnant. it shall call on my name, the remnant, and I will answer it. It will proclaim, it is my people, and I will exclaim, my ever-living God. So there you go. That's the standard that will be set up by the remnant. And then in verse 14, then the day of the Lord will come. I will collect all the heathen against Jerusalem to war. They will capture, plunder the houses, ravish the women, half the city should go out to captivity, blah, blah, blah. Then the ever-living will go out to fight with those heathen. So, just like I just said, that was him fighting. That's Christ the rock. And then he mentions in verse 5, so we're 14:5. First he mentions about this earthquake, and then when the ever-living God comes with all his saints. That's Revelation 19:14. And when that time arrives, there'll not be the cold light of the stars, there'll be continuous day appointed by the ever-living, neither night or day. In that period, living waters will extend from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western. Yeah. But just remember that the United States has the eastern and western sea, real seas on both sides. And then again he talks about nuclear war, their flesh wasting away, that's verse 12, while they stand on their feet, eyes wasting away, tongue wasting away, while they're standing on their feet. So that's nuclear war. Back in chapter 5, look at my videos that I've got in my description, and you can see it's nuclear war. And then it says they'll have to come up for the Feast of Tabernacles. And then at the very end, no more trading. So there'll be no more banking, in other words, in the house of the ever-living. So you remember he ran the bankers out, the traders out. So he's getting rid of the banking. So he's, that's the whole point of the issue, is the banking's controlling everything. And all these wars is controlled through banking in the great city that is Ephraim, which is why Ephraim is not mentioned in Revelation chapter 7. So that's just a brief overview of Zechariah. And 11:7. I guess we covered 11:17. Yeah, we covered that. Woe to that worthless shepherd. Now Jeremiah chapter 23. Of course, everybody knows this, or should. But one thing we should mention about Jeremiah chapter 23, it starts out, woe to those shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. Thus ever-living, talking about Christ addressing the shepherds. Shepherds, you scatter the sheep, chase them away, and do not collect them. Therefore I will impose upon you the wickedness of your proceedings, but I will collect the remnants of my flock from all the lands where I have driven them. Remember that the house of Israel was to be driven into all these heathen lands, and will restore them to their homes, and they shall be fruitful and multiply. So in the end time they were driven out, and then he said he'd go out with a strong arm and collect them and bring them back. The remnant left behind. That's the same prophecies. The days shall come when I'll raise for David a righteous offshoot and a royal king who will govern and do justice and do right in the land. That's verse 5, that's Christ. In those days, Judah shall be safe and Israel rest in safety. All 12 tribes. Verse 7, the time shall come when they shall no more say by the life of the ever-living who brought Israel up from the land of Egypt, but by the life of the ever-living who brought Israel up, conducted the race of the house of Israel from the land of the north, from all the lands where he had driven them. So he put them in captivity. He brought the heathen on. It was a punishment for the house of God. Exactly what I taught in Revelation. And then it just goes on about the preachers, and on through chapter 23. He didn't send them. Don't listen to their messages. I'm against those preachers who steal messages each from his mate. So in other words, they're just looking at other preachers preaching and just kind of copying that. But here's interesting, the last verse in 23. Therefore I'll make you a reproach forever and an everlasting object of scorn, which shall not be extinguished. So he's talking about, again, these people, Pharisees, Jews against Christ, as I call them. That's who he's speaking to. Everlasting object of scorn. But here in chapter 24, he kind of shows you who he's talking about these Jews against Christ are, or at least one group of them for sure, because he mentions first about the good figs and bad, says he distinguished between the two. So the good ones will be restored to their country, that's verse 6, that's 24 verse 6, and in their children, and not destroy them, and plant and not pull up. Also give them a heart to understand me. Alright, so they'll be Christians, and they'll understand the message. I'll be their God when they turn to me with all their heart. But verse 8, as for the bad figs, which are uneatable for badness. So it's good olives, bad olives, saints, whatever. It's all the same context. I'll take Zedekiah, king of Judah, and his nobles, and the remnant of Jerusalem remaining in this land, and make them a seed of evil to all the kingdoms of the earth, as a reproach and a proverb, to be a slander and a curse in every place which I drive them. So I'll also drive out the Jews against Christ. I'll also send sword, famine, plague to harass them. Plague can be armies brought against them, in other words, war. Harass them from off the land which I gave to them and their forefathers. So here again he absolutely tells you that these people are part of the 12 tribes. (25:14). I was just looking at that. I will repay to them according to their own acts or deeds, and like to what they have done. So you can read that in context. So at any rate, and he, talks about them more over here in chapter 27 and so forth. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about the bad figs, so on and so forth. And then when you get to 29, same thing. 29, just look at verse 9. And continue on up to about 23, about false teachers, false preachers, rotten figs, because they wouldn't listen to his messages. But he's telling you they're preachers, the people who are supposed to be teaching the truth, and they're not. And he tells you why. Okay, so let's go on up to Psalms 35:19. Alright, and this here again, this is a quote from John 15:25 about the people who hated me without a cause, speaking of Christ. Now, Psalms is, here's the thing about Psalms, put the Psalms into context about who who David's talking to, regardless of whether it's David who wrote the Psalms or whatever. Putting it into context about who are against, in this case David, who's against him, who's trying to hurt him or kill him, blah blah blah. False witnesses. Talks about people combining for his hurt. In other words, a military coalition. Think of it that way. Blah, blah, blah. Now, he mentions about 4 times in Psalms specific people who I call the EMP, Edomites, Moabites, Philistine, and he lists a number of others. But here again, maybe that's the context of who he's talking to, maybe it's not. But you can put it in context in reverse by looking at who he's talking to in the New Testament. For example, this came from John 15:25. He's quoting about these Jews against Christ who were going to kill Christ in the New Testament. So we know who those people are because we've looked at the other verses from Isaiah 6:9 and 29 and all these other verses that are quoted that show, and like the one we just looked at about the bad figs, who tell you that there were people of the 12 tribes, and generally the nobles and the leaders. So the people who are running things, and preachers and so forth. So you think Levites, but tribe of Judah, house of Judah, and we recall that Paul, said he was from a Benjamite. So Benjamite, Levite, house of Judah, Judahite, house of Judah. Any way you look at it, it's house of Judah. Those are the ones context comes back to. So if he quotes something that we know is context of these Jews against Christ, which are house of Judah, then that means that this context of who he's talking to, when you back up in chapter 35, for example. Now at the beginning, there you go, seize your shield. So that's Christ the shield. And he talks about Christ the rock. So there's Christ fighting. He's calling for Christ to fight against him, or fight for him against the others. And if you just back up to Psalms 34, that you've got this link in, I guess it's probably 16 to 1 Peter chapter 3, and then another one to John chapter 19 and verse 21, 22, right in that area, about how the Lord redeems his servants, and those who trust him will not fail, blah blah blah. So again, look at the cross-reference or your quotes from the New Testament, and then that's how you can put who David's talking to in the context, whether he's talking about the EMP attacking him, which, because he does specifically talk about these other groups of people. And I have that on my chart. I've listed all that and what he calls them and everything is all laid out on my Psalms chart. But other times he's talking about men of his own house, even against him for whatever reasons. But still, it's these Jews against Christ who go right back to the New Testament. So talks about, of course, the shield, Christ the rock, redemption, blah blah blah. So that's how you do it in Psalms, especially because you've got a lot of cross-references or quotes from the New Testament back to Psalms, which helps you put that into proper context. Them that hate me without a cause, be ashamed and brought to confusion. Okay. Hosea 9, 7 to 17 would be next. Oops. I bumped that. Bumped that, sorry. Okay, well, in Hosea, we've kind of been through it before. If you just start at the beginning, you notice it's talking about redemption for the house of Israel, house of Judah. But most of this is, I think, in time as well. The day of reckoning has come. That's 9:7. That's Judgment Day. The day of repayment. Israel shall know the reciters were fools. Talking about the preachers. The man with the spirit was mad. Preachers. Manifold vices. It mentions Ephraim. Prophets. Members of their fault will punish their sin. I met Israel like grapes in the desert, verse 10. Looked on your fathers like early ripe figs. There you go. Then they came to Baal Peor and fell in their shame. So it became corrupt as their laws. So he lays into Ephraim, if your sons should grow up, I destroy them as men. That's 12. Woe to them, I turn against them. I see Ephraim. Ephraim produces sons to be slain. Give them a womb that will fail. In other words, and breasts that are dry, so they won't have kids. Ephraim has failed. Their root is dried up. That's posterity. That's 16. They cannot bear fruit. In other words, children. Or if they should bear, I will kill the beloved of their breast. So there you go. They'll kill their children. My God will reject them. They listen not to him, and they shall be wonders in nations. So If you don't follow his law, that's not good, especially when you're in the business of teaching others what is correct, and you don't pay close heed to what you're doing. And especially when people come to you and tell you that there's a problem and that you're not teaching things correctly, and you just blow that off. The wonders of nations. Okay, Micah. Micah 3. Was that 1 to 12? I cry, listen now, chiefs of Jacob, as you rulers of Israel's house, or house of Israel. Want to have you no knowledge or judgment, hating the good but in love with the bad. And of course, it's the rulers, preachers, leaders. It mentions preachers in verse 5. Swindle my people. You'll have darkness, and the sun shall go down on such prophets, blackness spread over their day. For they have no message for God. Tell Israel of his crimes, Jacob his sin. They build Zion with blood and Jerusalem vice, whose judges decree for a bribe. So the judges are bribed. Well, there you go. Priests only teach for their pay, prophets for money. So, hirelings. Look over at Micah 4, but it shall be at the end of times, judgment day. The house of the Lord shall be fixed as the chief of the hills. That's, I think, New Jerusalem. Higher shall be than the heights. And New Jerusalem would be, if you go by what it says in Revelation, 1,500 miles square on the base and 1,500 miles high. So it's a pretty good sized pyramid. And to it all peoples shall flow, and he's basically speaking about the 12 tribes who will be the ones living there. But others will go there too. No more war. Verse 3, never learn to make war. Again, absolutely end times, if there's no more war. We shall each walk in the power of the Lord forever and ever be with our God. So, at that time, banished shall be a powerful nation. Lord will reign over there on Mount Zion from then and forever and ever. No more war, that's end time, can't be anything else. Preachers, prophets shall have night, darkness, blackness, be ashamed, blush, no message from God. So that kind of sums up that. Let me adjust this just slightly. Okay. So, I think that's all we need to say there. 12, 46 to 50. So let's go back to Matthew. Whoever does the will of my Father, they're my brothers, sisters, and mother. Yeah. So, that refers to John 15, 7 to 19. If you remain on me and my teaching remains in you, what you may wish you shall ask for, and it will come to you. Of course, remaining on me, that means following his law, teaching of Christ, exactly as it said in Revelation 12:17. Same idea. There's no change in context of following his law. In fact, to just back up to 14, 15, if you love me, keep my commands. And I'll ask the Father, he'll send you another helper to continue with you forever. The Spirit of truth. Blah, blah, blah. Whoever, and this is 21, whoever keeps my commands and regards them, it is he who loves me. I will love him, the Father will love him. Okay? If any man loves him, he will retain my message. That's verse 23. My Father will love him, and we will come to him and take up our abode with him. So, following his law is absolutely necessary. And then in verse just as 15:9, just as the Father loved me, so I've loved you. Continue in his love with me. If you keep my commands, you will continue in my love, just as I have kept the commands of my Father. So he's telling you, I followed the law. You need to follow it. He just said it like 4 times. And then my command is this: if you love one another just as I've loved you. Of course, that fulfills all the law. If you just look at it, if you did love God and love your neighbor as yourself, that you would actually fulfill all the laws. It would boil down to that. So, following his law boils down to love. Okay? He talks about the Jews against Christ. So, whoever does the will of the Father, if you follow God's laws I have, looking at the chart again, you are my friends as I have chosen you. And again, in Genesis 26:5, speaking about Abraham, I will confirm the Abrahamic covenant with you because Abraham followed my commandments, statutes, and laws and obeyed my voice. So, the law of Moses came from the law of Abraham. Abraham followed God's law, and that's actually what he was doing when he went and rescued Lot. He was actually following the law of justice and judgment, and asking Christ to, fight for him and be his shield and that kind of thing. So nothing changes here. 2 Chronicles, we got 27, or, 2 Chronicles, oops, alright, 2 Chronicles, start 6. Ever living God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens, and you rule in all the kingdoms of the heathen, and power and might are in your hands, and none can resist you? Are not you our God, who drove out the inhabitants of this country before your people of Israel, and gave it to the race of Abraham, your friend forever? Yes, so that's Christ fighting for them. So Christ the rock. And it mentions Christ the rock, about where it mentions his mercy endures forever. That's 20, yeah, it's still in chapter 20, 22. And at the moment they began to cheer and praise, the ever-living acted unexpectedly against the sons of Ammon, Moab, and the Edomites who were advancing against Judah, and routed them. For the sons of Ammon, Moab assailed the people of Edom with slaughter and destruction, and when they had destroyed the people of Edom, basically, each helped to ruin the other. So that's what he does. He confuses the armies, makes them fight against each other. So here's just another example of Christ the rock right there. Alright. So the other verse was Isaiah 41:8. I just didn't have that one marked. Alright, well, we went through that already. But you, my servant Israel and Jacob, whom I chose from my friend Abraham's race, I helped you from earth's bounds. I chose and called you and named you as my friend. I chose and not forsook. Fear not, you are my race. Dread not, I am your God. And then James 2:23. Well, let's back up to 19. You believe that there is one God, you do right. The demons also believe and shudder. But do you want to know, you vain man, what faith unaccompanied by results is worthless? Was not our forefather Abraham approved as righteous from the fact that he offered up his son Isaac upon the altar? So that was the work. So he had faith in Christ, but his work was the fact that he had to offer up his son. Thus you see his faith cooperated with his actions. So you had to have action. Faith without action doesn't count for anything. And from his actions his faith was perfected, and the scripture was fulfilled which said, Abraham trusted to God, and it was paid to him in righteousness. He was called a friend of God. You see that a man is made righteous by means of his actions and not merely by means of faith. So it's acting on your faith which made Abraham righteous. Following his law was what he was told to do. Obviously, you have to enforce his law, which is justice system and righteousness, which is what Christ intends to do from now on. I mean, you have to have God's law enforced. There's no other choice. So that finishes that. And 13:1 through 9. Guess we can go to 13:1 through 9. Alright, so Jesus was speaking the parables to a great crowd, and went out, gave them the parable of the sower. Last thing, 1 through 9, parable of the sower. Gospel of the kingdom only produces fruit from those who it is intended for, or the people who it's ordained for, it says in another place, which is the 12 kindred tribes. And then we'll look at the quotes, Gospel of the Kingdom for 12 tribes only. So, whoever has ears to hear, let him listen. So, he went on to explain the parables. Well, there you go. I guess we really should go a little bit farther, but in 13:10 to 23, same thing, is granted to you to understand the secrets or the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to others it is not given. And then he's talking to this royal priesthood, so he's absolutely talking to the 12 tribes. So let's just look up the quotes we got there, which is 13, oops, touch my camera again. 13:38, the sower of the perfect seed is the Son of Man. The field is the word, the perfect seed or the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the devil. Yeah, it tells you who the sons of the kingdom are. At any rate, 16, 18 through 20. I also tell you, upon that rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not overpower it. And to you I will give the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you may bind upon earth. But who is you? Who is he talking to? Well, right above in 13 he says he asks his disciples, who do men say that the Son of Man is? So he's talking to his disciples, which recognize that he's the Messiah that was prophesied from the Old Testament. Okay, and who was his people? 12 tribes. Who were they? 12 tribes. Now, some might want to argue, maybe that some of these disciples or apostles are not part of the 12 tribes. Well, good luck with that. I guess we'll have to do some videos on that as well to show them how that doesn't work. Let's just look at the rest of my quotes for the time being. Alright, 19:28 to 30. I'll tell you indeed that you who followed me, in the new birth, when the Son of Man will sit upon the throne of his majesty, shall then sit upon 12 thrones, reigning over the 12 tribes. Alright. 15 and 16. Well, and then, okay, so that was the thing on the laborers. Some, they were all paid the same amount, even though some worked for less. And then Christ says, am I not allowed to do with what I like with my own, or is it your eye malicious because I am good-natured? In the same way, the last may be first, and the first last. Twenty-two 14. Many are called, few are chosen, and that goes back to 2016. Is that where we were? Yeah. Alright. Sorry, I had to look back. 25, 31, 46. Alright, Judgment Day. When the Son of Man appears in His majesty and all His angels with Him, so that's Revelation again, 14. Then He will take His seat upon the throne of His majesty and collect all nations before Himself, and will separate them one from another, as the shepherd divides the sheep and the goats. And the sheep He'll place on His right hand, goats on the left. And they'll say, those on the right, come, you approved of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Well, we know from the foundation of the world that it was prepared for the 12 tribes. Now, people just say, well, they were cast off and then it was given to Gentiles, and I pointed out that Gentiles in context was 12 tribes. So, and he says the righteous will answer him. The others are for the devil and his angels in verse 41. And these he will dismiss into a long correction, but the well-doers to an enduring life. I'm not sure what that says in King James. Mine says it's a long correction. Alright, so that was 25. And then, 423, so that's Matthew. I guess it was supposed to be Matthew. But I'd have to look back on my other chart and see what I had on that. 422. Christ is preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and then yeah, okay. Well, just go back to chart 1. It's at the bottom on 423. And because there's a lot of cross references to Isaiah, and others point out that the ones he came for with the gospel, which is mostly Isaiah that I'm quoting down there, is the 12 tribes. We've been through some of that, but at any rate, it's on the chart, so we've at least got everything there on that part. We've been through that before, so just look back on 423. So that would wrap 13, 1 through 9, and then we should come back at 13, because there's well, yeah, there's a number of things there. So we should just come back on the next video and do 13:10 through 23 on video 17. So let's end it here. Thanks.